says, if you don't have skills or a decent education in this global economy, your chances for mobility are limited. The problem is especially acute to low-skilled black males, and many turn to crime and end up in prison, which further marginalizes them and decreases their employment opportunities. Wilson goes on to say, it would be great if the president raised such issues when he comments on the March on Washington, because I strongly believe he is fully aware of them. Now, I've heard that President Obama is supposed to address the group or in some way connect, maybe over TV, or maybe he'll even be there. I hope he does too, but you'll let me know when you get back because I'm not able to go. This article picks up on statistics that show that the economic gap between blacks and whites hasn't budged for 50 years. 50 years. A couple of points from it. It says a recent report from the Economic Policy Institute notes that this gap hasn't closed at all since 1963. Back then, the unemployment rate was 5% for whites and 10.9% for blacks. Today, it's 6.6% for whites and 12.6% for blacks. Same place, relatively speaking. It goes on to say, indeed, notes EPI, Black America is nearly always facing an employment situation that would be labeled a particularly severe recession if it characterized the entire labor force. From 1963 to 2012, the annual black unemployment rate averaged 11.6%. This was higher than the average annual national unemployment rate during the recessions in this period, which was 6.7%. So it goes on to show and to really ask, not just to show, but to ask the question, what have we been doing for 50 years? Marching in place? We've had a lot of marches, a lot of demonstrations, a lot of commemorations, a lot of crying and weeping and standing before statues and feeling good. But what have we done good for ourselves when it comes to economic empowerment? These stats say absolutely nothing. So now we're going back. You are already back from Washington. And I commend you for going there. I don't have any problem you going to a march. But like I said before, I hope you march to some black businesses on your way. I hope you march to a black restaurant. I hope you march to a black gas station. I hope you march, if possible, to some black-owned hotel to stay in. I hope you march to a black-owned bus company where you could charter their bus and ride to Washington. I just hope you march to some business and drop some money that you will inevitably have spent with a black business. And watch for my 2 articles that are coming out this week and next week, titled, Hey, Chocolate City, where the money at? Talking about Washington, D.C., and what it used to be as opposed to what it is now. And when you read the articles, you will see, again, this point made by this article is the same. Where's the progress? Yeah, what's the group? Funkadelic Parliament had the album, Chocolate City. We were celebrating, I used to go to D.C. in the 70s. I wasn't going for economic empowerment. We know how D.C. was in the 70s. Those of you who are in my age group, you know why we went. But now, here we are in 2013, and I've been to D.C. so many times in the last 2.5 years. And what I see now is sad. But read the articles. Hey, Chocolate City, where the money at? And it tells you where the money is, where the money at, as they say in those articles. This article by Goldfarb just continues on and on. It talks about poor black neighborhoods also have environmental hazards. We know that. You remember Mount Elda over in Winton Place? Why would you put a landfill in the middle of a neighborhood? How does that happen? And then they dump so much stuff in it, it becomes a mountain. It becomes higher than the houses. It came right up to the houses up at Garden Hilltop, and the methane gas was leaking through the ground and poisoning the kids who had swing sets right next to the garbage pit. How does that happen? It happens because we allow it to happen, number one, and it happens because we don't own where we live. That's why it's so easy for us to call where we live hoods now instead of neighborhoods. And before that, neighborhoods instead of communities. Elder landfill. It got so big they called it Mount Elder. And they had to tear down the houses up next to Mount Elder because they were polluted. The gas was coming out of the ground killing people. Can you imagine that in the middle of a neighborhood, which is now called a hood? Unbelievable. Anyway, it goes on and on. I'm not going to continue on this, but I just ask that those of you who went to Washington, I hope that you will commit to doing something relative to the Great March on Washington in 1963. If you don't, you probably went for nothing. You'll have some nice pictures. You can tell your children and grandchildren you were there. But what is it worth? What are you going to tell them you did in response to going? That's the question. We have to be better examples to our young people so that when it's time to pass the torch to them, they'll have something to stand on. They'll have some knowledge that we have shared with them. We have to be counselors. We have to be mentors to our young people because those of us who are older are not going to be here forever. Even though some of us want to hang on to these titles and these positions until they carry us out of here. But you're not going to be able to do it. And if we don't prepare our young people with something substantive, not just symbolism, but some substance when it comes to where they are supposed to go, what they're supposed to do, they are going to be right back in Washington 50 years from now, celebrating again the big March on Washington in 1963. Oh, that's going to be a huge one, the 100-year anniversary. But will they be in the same position that we're in now, having to look back and say, man, according to these statistics, we're still at the same place we were in 2013. That would be a sad commentary on us today. A sad commentary. That if we don't change now, 50 years is enough. It ought to be enough for all of us. And the proof is here that we have not changed, we have not advanced, we have not done what King died trying to do. So please, don't let the next 50 years, I won't be here, some of you won't be here, but the next 50 years, please. 2063, if the world is still here, black folks are going to converge on Washington, D.C. Again, probably 1 million people because, oh, it's 100 years now, I have to be there. But why are you going? Why are you going? Just to stand and like I said, march in place? To say you were there? That's not enough. It's really not enough. So I hope you leave, you have come back determined to be the example that you need to be to your children, to anyone's children, and to do some things rather than just celebrate the fact that you made a trip and stood where King stood and revisited all of the words that he said that day in 1963.